hello to the new ones. My name is Ryan. I'm a staffer here with Congresswoman, and I'm going to be meeting with you for the next couple weeks.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Good.
So-
That's good.
So last week, Jimmy said he would get a response from us. We talked that some of the people had felt threatened by some of the tactics used at Tulsi's town hall, and so we wanted to know the response that he got. Like, this was Jan. She was a woman that stood up at her town hall, and your moderator was a very large man. He approached her threatening, told her to sit down, and the whole message of that was, it sent a message. Keep your mouth shut and sit down. And having a large man threateningly approaching a smaller woman wasn't an image that we like to see. And so Jimmy said she was going to talk to Tulsi and give us a response this week. So we wanted to follow up with that and get what that information was.
So I will follow up with that.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry about that.
Can we hold you to making sure we get a response next
Yeah.
week?
We'll hold
Yeah.
you in a response for that.
Yeah.
It's not okay.
Yeah.
I'll push it up to the leadership. Yeah.
Okay.
He was pretty definite that he
Aggressive.
would respond
Yeah.
this week, and
Yeah.
it's a little disappointing to hear that something that is so serious and kind of goes against the spirit of participation that we think we.
And the spirit of aloha that's supposed to be here.
What was your name again?
Ryan,
And your last name?
Jocelyn.
Okay, great, thanks.
So, on new things, we know the ACA is in the House. They're trying to repeal that. We don't want Tulsi or Hanabusa to just show up and vote. We want them to be vocal against that on the repeal.
Okay. She's been pretty vocal in her opposition to that. So obviously with her press releases, and you can find her on her website and stuff.
I looked at her Twitter. I didn't see her being vocal on this. I saw her being vocal about marijuana, and I saw her being vocal about something else, but I didn't see her being vocal specifically on the new ACA.
I did.
You did?
Several.
Okay.
She's been real strong on that.
Okay.
But even louder is better. But I saw several
Okay.
posts that
Okay.
she's been very clear on the ACA.
Okay. And then Jan, we have some specific bills, right?
Oh yes. As you know, many of us marched in the tax march, and thousands or millions marched around the world. And there are a number of bills that are in the House regarding the Presidential Tax Transparency Act. One of them, Congresswoman Gabbard has signed, but there are two others that we'd like her to consider signing. So she has signed H.R. 305, the Presidential Tax Transparency Act, and there are two others that we'd also like her to consider looking at. 371, Presidential Conflict of Interest Act, which actually has a little bit more heft to it, and then also H.R. 540, the Presidential Tax Disclosure Act, and she made a big point at the tax march that she was in very much support of the presidential releasing his taxes. So we'd like to have her support on those two bills. There are also a couple other bills that have been introduced in the House. Mar-a-Lago Act, which is making access records available to lead American Government Openness Act, which is so that people visiting the White House and the southern White House, Trump Swamp in Mar-a-Lago, we will know who he's visiting with and making deals with. That's H.R. 1711. We'd like her to take a look at that and see if she would co-sponsor that. We think that's very important. And also, there is the No Taxpayer Funding for the Wall Act. She hasn't signed that one either. That's H.R. 1477. And if she's not interested in signing those bills, we'd like to know why, and if there are other bills that she is signing or co-sponsoring that are in the spirit of opposing the Trump administration, the Trump agenda that she's signing. Because I looked up all the bills that she's signed since this Congress started, and she signed 92 bills or resolutions, and none of them have anything to do other than that one
305.
305 that specifically is opposing the Trump agenda.
I'll pass that out.
Thank you.
And that's because we want to reiterate how important it is to stay focused on the conflict of interest to try and rescue the office of the president, because it is in such disrepair right now. So we're trying to preserve the institutions of democracy, and right now the voice for that is in Congress. Judiciary is doing its job. We need to see Congress do the same thing. So all these little diversions that happen, whether it's bombing this person or bombing that person or whatever they're doing, we cannot allow these attacks on the very institutions of democracy, which has to do with conflicts of interest and what's going on with Russia, to just be forgotten. It's more important than anything.
And then another thing that Jimmy was going to get a response on that I had brought up last week was, so Tulsi has repeatedly, she hasn't said that Assad's regime was culpable for the chemical attacks in Syria. And my CEO's brother-in-law is the national security correspondent for ABC News. And what I brought up last week was that the publicly available intel was that the U.S., monitored the air attack. We saw the plane take off from the Shayrat Air Force Base, circle for 20 minutes. We have intercepts from Syrian officers talking about the attack. We know that the Shayrat Air Force Base had chemical weapons before. We know the people that used to work on the chemical weapons were present that day. And then also we have satellite photos of where the bomb hit and that it was in the middle of the road, not near a warehouse. There's also the staining that is present on chemical bombings that's there. And I don't see how she cannot say that his regime was culpable for that attack. And so Jimmy was supposed to get a response on that. And also, when at her town hall, what's bothersome is like she parallels her time in Iraq and the war in Iraq with the Syria situation, and they are not the same thing. And to parallel that because she was in a place where no weapons of mass destruction happened and use that as a reason to ignore actual intel is really dangerous.
Sorry, I'm just writing that down.
Yeah. No, thank you.
And just also for clarification, we'd like to know, was Congresswoman Gabbard visiting Syria in January as a civilian or as a member of Congress? There's been various reports, and by her own account, she sort of muddied the record on that. We'd like to have a little clarification of that, and also what the funding was of her trip. There's also been various reports on that, so we'd like some clarification of the funding for herself and for her security.
Yeah, I mean, the report that I had seen was that the Kwam brothers funded it through Access and one of their shell companies in Ohio, and they have the ties to the Syrian Nationalist Party, and they're very pro-Assad. So as a constituent, that makes me worried that maybe her perspective has been skewed by having people that are pro-Assad take her on this trip to pro-Assad. And I know that she has been reported to have paid the money back, but the initial funding was not her.
Has she announced where the funding has come from?
She's put out several releases about her Syria trip.
Yes,
So
but
it says-
the specific question, where did the money come from that she paid back?
Yeah.
Is that come out?
I'll push
I mean,
it
I
into
thi-
that.
I
I
mean-
can't recall specifically.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Release and whatnot, so I'm not
Right,
gonna misquote.
because
Yeah.
we're feeling a little concerned, and again, we follow this closely, and frankly, I think I'm in the minority. I think it was valuable that she went there. I'm in the minority, but that's not the issue. It's the issue, the unanswered question is, where did the funding come from? Was she a civilian or representative member of Congress? And what is her position now on the evidence of the Syrian government involvement in that? And I believe she said previously, hard to tell. Is that her current position, or does she have some other information?
I mean, her going wasn't the disconnect that comes from me that I wanted clarification from her was that, you know, at her town hall, she said that her going and her meeting with Assad was to spread aloha and to that you have to talk to people that you may not agree with in order to try to broker peace. But then when we talk about North Korea, it's a totally different story. It almost sounds like she wants to go like full tomahawk. And she's talking about missile defense, and you know, there isn't going with Mike Pence to go and talk to people in North Korea to try to broker any peace or spread aloha. So I don't understand what makes the two people different when these are both war nations. And then the other thing that's disconnect for me is that she said at her town hall that she has publicly said she didn't want support from people that like Steve Bannon and others, but I haven't found anything where she's publicly denounced Bannon. And there's been too many people in her history that are controversial that seem to take an interest in Tulsi over other Democrats. You know, Steve Bannon set up the meeting with her in Trump Tower before the inauguration. He has publicly supported her. And there's other people in her past, like Assad has publicly supported. There's all these, there's people from a Hindu nationalist party that have supported her that don't seem to, that have also supported the views of killing Muslims. And so there's a lot of these people that have controversial issues that I don't feel fall in line with the values of her constituents. And it's not necessarily individually them supporting her, but why are all these specific people supporting Tulsi? And I don't understand that, and I need clarification of that.
Also, if she went as a civilian, if you or I went as a civilian, we would not have access to Assad.
Yeah.
So there's a part of that that just doesn't ring true. So she must have had the clout of being a congressperson to be able to meet with someone like Assad. And the video I've seen of her meeting with people in Syria, she met with people who are very pro-Assad. She didn't have a very balanced view, at least what video we've seen.
Yeah.
I find it hard to believe that she didn't interview anybody who had a more balanced view of what's going on. They've been in civil war for 6 years now. So not to interview anybody who had any opposite view of what is basically a dictator, I found kind of circumspect.
Yeah, I mean, she has mentioned that, you know, like, that the people that she talked to in Syria don't want to leave Syria, they don't want to go to another country, they don't want to learn a second language. And, you know, I don't see that when you look at these pictures of people clinging to boats trying to get out, or when I hear NPR interviews of Syrian refugees that have made it to Canada and talking about how they love Syria, but they had to leave because it's so violent and they had to get out of their country. You know, and to me it sounds a little bit like an isolationist mentality.
Anyway, we've asked Jimmy for some of that stuff a number of times, so it's time for a response.
Yeah, I mean, we were kind of really hoping that he would actually get back to us this time, and it's a little disheartening that he didn't pass information on to you or give it to you to talk to us. So I think, you know, going forward, we're definitely going to follow up each week on the stuff that we asked.
Any other issues?
I just wanted to add one more thing. It's going back to what Jan said, which we had mentioned to the senators we met with. These bills, you know, might just be symbolic, but that again is very important. I mean, so we need to see her come out against all the kind of craziness that's happening in DC and against Trump. So it's, to me, I would look at the more bills that she signs to try and get Trump accountable, or to try and find out what the hell is going on with his taxes, what is going on with Russia, the more I would, you know, vote for her again, seeing that she is pushing against the Trump agenda. So I just wanted to throw that out.
She needs to use the power of her office and the power of her voice, because she
Absolutely.
represents all of us.
Well, we want all of our representatives calling out, like Trump's administration is not in support of anybody that is a minority in this country. You know, there's and especially like with the creation of the Voice Office, that victims of immigrant crimes, which is pushing this propaganda that the immigrant populations are the ones causing these crimes and causing stuff. And like, what's happening now is that we are creating a vulnerable community of these immigrants because ICE is working with police officers. These immigrants, if they are victimized, don't feel safe going to the police, and they're still human beings. And Hawaii is a diverse place. You know, like, not all of us are white Americans, and we want, especially our representatives, to call out racism and call out discrimination and not let this be normalized. And I know Tulsi has a thing of not wanting to call names, but not making people accountable for their hate is just propagating that hate and allowing it to continue.
Correct.
CTs? Anybody?
And
Anything?
another thing, Jimmy, was I had asked, and it relates to Jan's question on supporting these tax provisions. I had asked and want to know Tulsi's position on no tax cuts without tax returns. Is that a position that Tulsi supports? And if not, what is her position on, Republican proposed tax cuts? And should we be requiring Trump taxes before we consider the tax return, tax proposals? And it relates to the conflict of interest.
So the bottom line of that is that she's not going to make any deal that supports Trump's disastrous tax reform movement in exchange for his tax returns. So she's been pretty voiceless about this particular issue. She's called for the president's tax returns. She's even co-sponsored legislation that you mentioned earlier.
One of 3 bills, and it's the most watered down of the 3.
So that's
Okay.
what. So to that point,
Start.
that's what shows that.
Thank you
A
for that
step.
clarification,
Yeah.
and that's a good step. The question that I was saying as a precondition, it's certainly wise not to negotiate tax cuts for returns, but as a precondition to consider tax cuts, you want to know, is he giving himself a tax
Exactly.
break?
We want our representatives to be vocal about. We want to see if there's collusion. We want to see if there's conflicts of interest. We want that out and being transparent, and we want all of our representatives to be vocal about that, because we don't think there's a fire if there's this much smoke.
And similarly, if our congressperson doesn't think we should do that,
What's our strategy?
yeah, what's the strategy? And then, which is conversely, then how can we support her? Because I think we're definitely in agreement. I like, and I'm supporting my congressperson on these are disastrous tax cuts. And is it a good strategy to say, we're not going to even start talking until you give your tax returns? And if she doesn't think that's a good policy, how can we support her where we are in firm agreement? Thank you.
That raises a bigger issue too, which is that I think we look at our Congress people as having a dual role. On one hand, they're representing us. On the other hand, we also want them to lead us. And so we're here, we're active, and we come here, we ask questions. Sometimes we ask hard questions, but basically, we're on Tulsi's side. And we want to support, for the most part, the same kinds of things that she wants to do. So where there's opportunities for us to do things that we're not currently doing or do things differently, we want to hear about that, because we're going to come here with questions, and we'd like answers, but what we'd really like are marching plans, marching orders, because we want the same thing she wants.
Well said.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody have anything else to add? No? Okay. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.